plan today is to take you to that distant land of long ago and far away, Taunton Bay. In the 1980s, 1986 is when I began opening my eyes to the natural world from this particular point of view. And boy, was that exciting. It was one of the most wonderful 2.5 years. I was like Thoreau in his little cabin in Walden Pond. I was in nature. I wasn't just observing it, I was part of it. And the woodpeckers came down, and I would walk around Burying Island every day, taking pictures of what I saw. And every day I saw something new, and I learned something new. And fortunately, I was a photographer, so there's a record of my trails and my adventures. And the first slideshow I want to show you is the seasons of Taunton Bay that goes through, I start in fall, winter, spring, and summer, in that order, which basically captured what I saw in those days. And some of it is the same now, and some of it has moved on. So, Island, Butler Point, Egypt, Bay, Hancock, and it's, you know, that's just a hint of what this place contains, that wonderful mixture of convoluted shoreline, hills, valleys, and mostly what you see in the land is trees. We haven't been fully developed yet. We're still latent. Okay, so the seasons, you all know about the seasons. This is a bottom water temperature chart of Taunton Bay. So in the fall, you can see the temperature falls very rapidly. And then in the winter, here's zero. The temperature on the bottom is below zero. It's 28 degrees. It's sub-freezing. And then as
centigrade.
Pardon me?
Centigrade. 0 centigrade.
0 Fahrenheit. No, I'm sorry.
It says C.
0 centigrade. I stand corrected. And
So that's
on cue, at the new moon in March, it shoots up and in summer reaches the peak. So moisture, winds, and everything else varies along with this, but that's the basic pattern that determines why things are as they are. And here's my little study of why we have the seasons. The sun is in the middle of its planetary system. Here's the Earth orbiting around the sun, illuminated on the face towards the sun, and we're tilted 23 degrees off the plane in which we swing around the sun. So when we in the northern hemisphere are tilted away from the sun, it's cold. When we're tilted towards the sun, it's warm. So here's summer, there's winter, here's the first day of spring, there's the first day of fall. And this little star indicates where we are in winter, tilted away from the sun, and here we're tilted towards it. And it's just that little tiny differential as we turn around the sun that gives us the seasons. And so solar radiation varies. Highest in June, July is almost as high. And so that represents the amount of radiation we get from the sun.
And the tilt represents a longer day.
It also means a longer day
I mean,
and a shorter night, and conversely in
that's
winter.
part of the warming.
This is a quote from Henry David Thoreau. Our thoughts and sentiments answer to the revolution of the seasons. And I find that's true of me. And when I'm in nature, that's doubly true. When I'm in culture, you turn on the news and you get cultural chaos coming at you. But if you have one toe in nature, things are different in the fall than they are in the summer, and you know it. The news just doesn't blare on and all. So I break it into these four sections. That's with my telephoto lens. It's a 1,000-millimeter lens. This little island is in Taunton Bay. Here's Hancock, and then here are the hills and the trees of Mount Desert Island, and the notch between Door Mountain and Cadillac Mountain. We're right on the path of the glacier that scooped out that notch. You know, it went right from Taunton Bay down there. So we're in line with that, and that's why you get this very marked profile. This looks like fall clouds. These aren't summer clouds. This is a little bit ominous, a little bit of heavy weather maybe coming. But these guys, early on in the fall, the British soldiers are likened with bright red caps, the haircap fern, haircap fern. And these are fairy goblets, little tiny lichen. You have to practically get down, you have to kneel to find them, but they're all over. And there are more of them than there are of us, fortunately. That's why the world is as sane as we find it. But in fall, this is Spartina grass, and it is now 3 colors. And that's the first sign, along with the falling leaves, that something is happening. This is happening. Leaves are turning colorful. And once that happens, you start looking for them. And where I live now in senior housing in Bar Harbor, a woman goes out and paints the leaves that she finds and puts them on her door. And I think that's a wonderful thing to do. She's kind of welcoming the change of the season. And this poplar, large leaf poplar, the veins suddenly look like a tree. And once it has a good idea, it doesn't lose it. Nature repeats that pattern over and over again. So it wants us to notice what's going on. This is happening. You look at the woods and the evergreen stand the same, but the coniferous tree, the deciduous trees look different. Super high tides come in November, and you begin to notice your feet get wet. The bunchberry, I always call it bunchberry dogwood, but I think the name is bunchberry, turn purple. It's one of the many things that turns purple. The blueberries broadcast the change of the season by revealing a purple pigment inside. Maple leaves obviously do that. Now they're so diseased, there's barely any color left. This year they're just looking awful. They're so speckled. And so, as I said, this land is far away. I can't go back to 1986, but this is the way it looked then. Then here are the British soldiers and the fairy goblets with a coating of frost. You look down at your feet and suddenly everything is different. Here's a sweet fern leaf, and it looks totally different. And the beautiful thing about it, every day, everything looks different because of the weather conditions, if you notice it. You don't just say, oh, it was cold last night. You have to go out and check it out to make sure you read the language. I forget the name of this plant. Maybe somebody here knows what it is. My whole life, I looked at it in the summer, and I never knew it had little hairs all over the leaf. But when they got a coat of frost, lo and behold, there was a dimension, and it looks like almost a Venus flytrap trying to hold an insect down in the bottom of the leaf. I don't know why they have those hairs, but there they are, so I should look it up in a book someplace, and I never had. Even grass looks different. What used to be drops have frozen into icicles. And the sumac berries same thing, they look different. Even the moon and Venus look different. They look kind of chilly. On this particular year, there was kind of a conjunction of them, 1986. This is my window looking out, glazed with icicles. And in the morning, when the sun shone with a warm light, they just turned a little shade of different color. And when I moved there was a resident fox that had a litter and lived in a burrow down from my cabin. And this little guy is sitting contemplating the north wind. He said, whatever happened to the southwest wind that blew in such warm weather? And poor dear stalked off and said, I don't like this. But it stayed on for a year. This is one of my favorite pictures of a crow being a crow. It's not, you can't tell it's fall, but I took it in fall, so I put it in here. There's a pair of harbor seals. Everyone has a different coat. Oh, excuse me. Dark with white spots, white, kind of warmish colored with a dark face, white face. Everyone has a personality and is different. And I tried to keep track so I could identify a seal and recognize it the next time I saw it. And no such luck. They never show the same body part. The fishermen are still out harvesting lobsters in the fall and throwing things overboard, which the seagulls just love to receive. It's kind of a dole for them. The wormers are still out. I'm amazed how people who work for a living outdoors work in December and in the fall. Sullivan, going diving, and of course the water is warmer. The worst time is April because the water never warms up because the sun isn't warm enough in the Gulf of Maine to warm it. And in December, it's still got some residual leftover heat from the summertime. So the scalloper can go down in a wetsuit and not freeze to death, even with snow on the branches. These are semi-palmated sandpipers, and they fly through in the fall in 3 waves, or summer and fall. As soon as the females give birth, they get out of the tundra up by Hudson's Bay, and they fly as a group of females down. And one of the sites they stop in is Taunton Bay, Hog Bay in particular. Then, leaving the males to watch over the young, a month later, the males fly down, leaving these little guys who come down in the end of September. Look how new and shiny, they're like a new quarter that you get at the bank or something. And semi-palmated means their feet are half webbed, semi, and I don't know if this one has the picture of that or not. No, I don't have it on here. Mergansers, red-breasted mergansers, form flocks. They're going to fly to warmer country. And I think they invented the punk haircut. They just are, you know, they have these hairs on the top of their head that are very striking. And this is a typical fall scene of some kind of duck or goose flying to the south for warmer climate. Canada geese particularly. And nothing thrills me so much as the music when they honk, and particularly when they recognize a familiar flock and they want to join them, they call back and forth with this. It sounds like beautiful music, and they welcome one another. They always leave one on guard to look for danger because they feed by bottom ending and putting their bills and their heads underwater, which is a very dangerous position to take. So there's always one who's very vigilant. These are greater scaup back here. We have a flock of 700 of them down from Canada, and they eat mussels. This is a surf scoter, the victim of a hawk. You can see the damage to its head and the whole body. It has no viscera at all, but it's such a beautiful beak, which you never can appreciate unless you can get close to it, with this big black spot, the yellow, the red, the subtle gradations from one into the other with a background. And we have quite a few of those in wintertime. Typical winter view before the ice comes, and that little green dot tells me we're going to change seasons and move on to winter. So let's do that. This is the king of Taunton Bay. I can tell in profile only one seal stays all winter long, and that's the alpha male in the herd. And he protects it from other males moving in on his territory. And he's the sole guardian until the 1st of April, when his harem of females come back. And it was, in these days, it was always the 1st of April when they showed up. But I recognize him, he has a personality. Here is fresh water draining off the rocks on the shore, forming elephant's feet, and this is frozen water on the surface of the salt water, frozen. And you see things like this, which you can't imagine in the summertime that such a thing could emerge, but there it is, fresh water meeting salt water. The whole bay freezes over. First very thin, first 1/8 of an inch, and I could drive my boat through it. But when it's a little thicker, you can't do that, and Bering Island is basically cut off. So you can have the bay look like that one day, then it melts and the ice goes out, and it looks like that. And that's kind of November. But this is a bright sunny day in December, when the sun is at its lowest. That's about high noon, and you can see the sunlight comes in at a very low slant, and we just don't get much warmth, so we put on our mittens and our scarves. Even Cadillac Mountain and Door Mountain look different, and Taunton Bay particularly. But the interesting thing is this provides a pathway for mammals to come from the mainland to the island and vice versa, so they can go one way and then back the other way. And this was a totally surprising phenomenon. The ice on the bay floats on the top of the water, so of course it rises with the tide and falls with the tide. And on this sloping beach, as the tide goes down, it cracks and it forms kind of an accordion fold, and then the tide goes down further or rises further. These blocks of ice and snow show the thickness, it's probably 8 inches thick, and that's the top level that gets displaced by the high tide. But the ice on the slope just folds and then rises and folds and rises, and it worked out a compromise situation. What's this?
Footprints.
Whose?
Who's on bucket?
Well, my guess is it's a white-tailed deer, because it's walking 1 foot in front of the other, and deer have learned that the ice is very treacherous, because it can give way, and I've seen deer fall into the ice where it's weak, and they cannot get out, and so they're trapped, and they put their front hoofs in and try to dig them in, and it's a very fortunate deer that can pull its way up. So here it was powder snow when the deer walked across, and then the wind blew the snow away, but where the deer's hoofs had compressed it, it stuck and left this footprint. There they are frolicking on the water. They're just having a ball, because where else could they get a field delivered to them of this size? Everything else is trees. And there they are walking single file. This one is taking the risk of thin ice up ahead, and they're about 25 feet apart. So that, how do they know that? How do they know to do that? But they live longer if only one deer in the flock, in the herd, goes under. There's a ledge here that the tide goes up and down over until it gets covered with blocks of ice. I made the sin of clicking my shutter, and I was probably a football field away from these guys, but boy, are they alert. What's that? That was Steve taking a picture. And then they got out of there. They knew it was a new sound. This is on the island itself. This is a vole running, not hopping as they can do, but running fast, and here's a fox chasing the vole. And you can just picture the scene. What kind of bush is this? These are sumacs in a field. And so that's a shadow of the sumacs, and the vole and the fox having a drama against that background. Here's my wood pile. Here, a mink came up and for some reason was checking it out, looking for mice that might reside in the fold. I've seen both otters and mink. And here's the big snowstorm where the island, here are the blocks of the upper ice, here's the bay, and you can see the spruce are just flexible and meant to not break, but to give with the weight of the snow after a blizzard. So a quiet walk on the beach is pretty much impossible because you're blocked by all of these new barriers. But it's interesting, there are footprints out here where the deer go, and I'll show you some of those. See those footprints? And you can see them over there. And when the ice goes out in March, mid-March, 15th of March, it used to be, I always felt sad that I wouldn't be able to tell who'd been walking on the ice, because I can't tell who walks on water. But every rock has a characteristic shape and gives its characteristic shape to the ice that sinks on top of it. And here, this is tidal ice rising up, but this is wind-driven froth, so it comes in from the side. And so it's like it's being painted by somebody. Some kid gets loose with a whitewash bucket. And sometimes the early ice is thin and it crumps against the rock and breaks into slabs. This is a boulder. I don't know what caused those rabbit ears, but that's a creature of the tide. So it's worth looking at the rocks on the shore after every tide, because it's always different. Never twice the same. And this hat just was stuck on top of the rocks. This part fell down with the tide, but that liked the view from up there. So it's always different. An explosion. And it's an explosion in slow motion, because the ice is going down very slowly, so the shards break until, so you can't see it happen. It just goes at too fast, at too slow a rate. Sometimes it's very delicate with thin slices. That's obviously different rocks. And here's one of the blocks caught, is suspended there and there. But just imagine the water was up here and it was floating on the water. lifted it up, and then when it let it down, it was suspended like that. And here, all the way to the mainland, that's Hancock's. This was frozen over. You get fogs in the winter with all the moisture. You get snow in the winter. You get ice in the winter. And that's sunrise over Sullivan, that's Evergreen Point. And this is Bering Island, the southeastern point. And the ice breaks against the rocks. And that's Skutik, and you can see the fire tower on the top. Or not the fire tower, the antenna. I used to call this Seal Rocks. This is off of Hatch Point. And the seals used to go over there and haul out. But when people built their houses on Hatch Point, they never came back. So now it's no seal rock. But I like the ice with the mountain. I call these witch trees. Something happens to the leader and the tree doesn't go up. The leader dies and then the lower branches get the energy and then they all go out and grow up around. So it creates a very complicated formation. White pines in the winter, every little needle. And my precious trails get blocked by fallen trees. A lot of wind in the winter and a lot of heavy snow, and it's stressful for trees that aren't quite solid. If I had my brother with me, he'd say, Steve, walk under that tree, and then just as I walk under, he'd pull it. I remember doing that as a kid, but it's beautiful when you don't do it. This is a cabin my father built in 1941. He was a boy from Vermont. He had experience with stone walls, which was piling one flat rock on top of another. And he took that skill he had and built a cabin 30 feet long and 15 feet wide. And it was such a heroic thing to do. It was so improbable of a college English professor to do that. It was another side of his personality that was very lovely to discover. And here it is with 3 feet of snow on the roof. So it's a good thing he made it fairly strong with stout rafters. I was on the crew that helped gather the stones. We'd go out and fortunately, the Bering Island, people don't realize, is all Ellsworth schist, which is layered. And so if you put a chisel in and break it, it breaks into a block that has parallel sides, ideal for building stone walls and cabins. This is this shingle cabin that I built. I laid the foundation in 1970 and built it in 1977 with its solar power, which gave me electricity, lights, and a radio. So I was living in pretty fancy style there. That's my wood pile, one of my many wood piles. And when flows break free, everybody looks for a free ride. And it's so funny to watch them just go out with the tide. You know, they're not upset with anything, they're just going for a boat ride. Migratory ducks from Canada come down. These are all mussel eaters. The golden eyes, its eye is bright yellow and it has a white. Just like the surf scoter had a black spot on its bill, this one has a white spot. And here they are diving for mussels on the edge of the line. The shore is over here. They're diving into the shallows to get dinner. Here's one merganser. This is mating golden-eye ducks. These guys, bending their heads back and looking skyward, think they're appealing to the females who do not do that. And the females are the dark ones with no white feathers. And they're there judging who's got the handsomest neck or whatever, I don't know. But look at it, he's craning his neck up. It's just a wonderful display to watch all these guys preening and putting on their best show for the ladies. And loons are doing the same thing. And their courtship happens underwater because she'll dive and he'll dive right after her. And there's something about his performance underwater that she's gauging whether he has the strength or not to be a good mate. So in the duck world, it's all, and probably in the human world, it's females who make the decisions and the men have to show their prowess. There's a couple of mergansers in a place that isn't quite frozen over. Look at that hair.
So that's a male merganser, or is
Yeah.
that a different kind of merganser than the redhead?
It's a red-breasted merganser. Now, I can't tell. I think the females are different, but that may be males in blooming plumage. I am not sure. These are the greater scaup, which come down in a huge flock in the winter. They are mussel eaters, and they are extremely disciplined. When an eagle comes, they form a line, and one on one end and one on the other end takes off, so they don't conflict with one another. And then this wave of taking off goes down the line. You know, it's like their mothers taught them that. How do they know to do that? But that way, they, you know, if they all took off at one time, it would be just chaos, and they'd bump into each other. Here, on one day, I heard this splashing sound in early March, and I went down to the shore, and here were these, they're called bluebills because their bill is actually blue, but greater scaup is their given name. And you can see that one has seaweed in its bill. What they're doing is they're diving down and gorging on seaweed that grows in the bottom, sea lettuce type things, dulse and so forth, and coming up, and they spend an hour on a banquet. And then I'll show you what they did after the banquet. Those are greater scaup flying, and you can tell them by this white edge of the top surface of the wing. After the banquet, they took an hour's nap on the shore, on the water. They just tucked their heads under the wings, and they all went to sleep, and they didn't leave a guard or anything. Then, after an hour's nap, they did this. One of them took the lead and went out to the edge of the ice, and I think that's the lead duck. And then they don't just follow there, but where the ice turns around, they go back that way, and then they go out there. It's like they're treading the demarcation line between spring and summer, or winter and spring. And you can see other animals streaming in to join this procession. And I think they're sorting themselves out from the alpha individual who's going to lead them in flying home to Canada, and then the lesser ones in the middle. But here they are, going single file all around, you know, and this was probably a half-mile long parade of ducks. It was quite spectacular. And everybody else here eventually takes their place. And I suspect the old ones, the weaker ones, the ones who are left behind, you know, they don't make the trip. Canada geese up. I was right in the sunlight, so this one couldn't see me, and I was just a few feet away from him because he was blinded by the sunlight. And rarely did I get a chance to get close to them. Arctic jellyfish from Newfoundland come down, and this one, unfortunately, you know, this is a big one, 2.5 feet across. They get washed up on the beach and then freeze to death. So that's the end of that guy. But in the water, you can see them and they're undulating and feeding. The biggest one I ever saw was in the summertime. It was 6 feet across. It was huge. And of course, I saw it in my boat. On the one day I didn't have my camera with me. So I made an X on the side of the boat and rowed to shore, got my camera, came back, and I never could find it again. But it was an amethyst jewel. You could look into it and see every organ and everything going on and the filaments hanging down below. It was like looking into the universe through a telescope. Only there it was in the bay. It was a beautiful sight. Eagles are designed for winter hunting. They just look like snow on the top and snow there. So when you get model trees that have spotted snow, like spruce trees, they're totally invisible because this black becomes the black of the tree. That's the site where an eagle ate a duck. And you can see the tips of the wings here when it landed, heavily laden with a duck. And there's the end of the wings over there. Sea smoke in late winter when it warms up. Then the lobstermen and the scallopers come out when they can get access to the bay. And then finally, the ice breaks up. This is a day to celebrate. There's going to be dry ground underneath. But look at the prints on these floes. Prints here. I was sorry to see them leave. But that leads on to springtime, everybody's favorite season. Or in Maine, maybe not, but I like fall because it lasts so long. The Gulf of Maine provides that heat which we bask in. But the blueberries do bloom. But first the snow has to go. The year before, the local eagle had 3 young in one nest. And lo and behold, they went away for the winter, and then one day, suddenly they showed up. You wouldn't get 83 eagles consorting like this together because they're so competitive. But these, I'm sure, were the 3 out of the same nest. They're siblings, and so they tolerate the presence in close proximity. Snowshoe hare, its winter white hairs, which are long, are being shed, revealing the brown underneath, which is short, but it's a pretty good match to pre-green grasses, so its camouflage system works pretty well. It thinks it's invisible, and they just poise like, they figure if they don't move, they'll think they're a rock or something. Not all deer make it. I saw 2 deer walk across the ice. This is after I lived on the island and I was living with Bob and Mary McCormick on Butler Point as a house guest for the winter. And I saw, in the middle of winter, 2 deer walk across the ice to Bering Island. And lo and behold, 10 minutes later, 2 coyotes followed right behind them. And the coyotes went over, and then I saw the coyotes come back an hour later, but not the deer. And this is what happened to the deer. 2 deer killed by 2 coyotes, and 1 coyote came back limping. So a deer got a good blow of a foot in on it somewhere. But the natural bacteria just take all the flesh off, and that's what was left in the springtime. Harbor seals come on the 1st of April. Here it is, the 1st of April. And again, look at the difference. A white face and white spectacles, they're all different. Pregnant, full of fat, and with a young which they give birth to on Bering Island Ledge. And here's a little guy nursing from the mother, and they both look pretty relaxed. I hate to show these pictures because I find people want to see what I've seen, so they'll go out and look for them in April and disturb them, because I was on Bering Island when I took those pictures, looking through my telephoto lens. So at one point, 20 years later, I wanted to do an assessment of how many seals we have in the bay. So I set out counting them on every rock and so forth. So I had this trouble of figuring out how many, because as I moved, the seals looked totally different as I cruised, and it was very hard to count them. And I have a PowerPoint devoted to seals that shows that the little guys are born, and sometimes they are abandoned. This one, after I listened to its plaintive calls, it was the most wrenching sound. I couldn't stand it anymore, and I called up College of the Atlantic and I said, there's a seal, and it's been 3 days without a mother, probably not eating. What do I do? And at that time they had a seal rescue program, and the guy said, if you can get it in a cardboard box, look out for the claws, bring it over, they'll immediately rehydrate it and ship it to the aquarium down in Boston. So that's what I did. At the time, herons were nesting on the island, noble herons. Here's one picking up sumac twig. If you know sumac wood, it's extremely light but very strong. It's the ideal material for building a nest from. So in the spring, they too came back on the 1st of April. They're following the frost line is what they're doing. So it's the same for seals as it is for herons. And going through the sumac patch and picking up to make something that's like that. Not an artfully built nest. You know, it's kind of crude, but they line it with soft stuff, and most of these are sumac twigs or spruce twigs, which are extremely strong. And she's incubating eggs. And they've got their spring finery on. The oaks look pretty good when they come out. I've always loved this, you know, a couple of days when they look like that. And even maples look pretty good. And the candles on the white pines are great. And this is a sumac. This is where there was a male sumac display last year, and that's what it looks like now. Spring is so exciting to see this, you know, there's some color besides white. Nicely ornamented. Don't know why they chose that day to land there like that, but they did. So here are new leaves and a new woodpecker. It's a hairy woodpecker. I came across these two eagles sitting together, a male and a female, on the branch of an oak tree in late winter, but it was really just inside of March, inside of springtime, so I included it here. But this is, can you tell if this is a male or a female? Notice the bulky size. The male eagle is a third smaller than the female. They call them a tercel. And so this big solid figure is a female. But look at her, she is just singing her heart out, calling her mate, who is up in the snowstorm, and he comes and they sit on the branch together. So there's lots of exciting bird activity. Here goes the greater stock. Here come the loons. Here come flowers. Nothing looks better. What's that? The most beautiful flower in my book that there is. It's just perfect. And it's made for hummingbirds. It can get up from underneath. It can flap right beneath that and put its beak up in there and get the nectar that's in these trumpets. Saxifrage means rock breaker, and it's in a crack in a rock and no soil, just water. And rock breaker because its roots force the rock apart. Canada May ruby. Labrador tea. I think that's one of the most wonderful plants that there is. It's just so exciting to see it. On the one day it looks like that. And lady slippers, which are so ingenious, you have to take your hat up. The only way in, there's a slit in the middle here, and a bumblebee can crawl in there, but to get out, you see that's points in, so it can't force its way out. It has to come out up here, and it brushes against the pollen and coats the pollen on its back. How did lady slippers get designed to trap dealing with another species? You tell me, you'll be a smart person. And looking behind, total symmetry. You don't look here, it doesn't look symmetrical, but on this axis, total symmetry. Beach pea, blue flag iris. What's that called? Blue-eyed grass. It's a humble little flower, but it's related to iris, and it's got the same coloration. And here's bunchberries. And lingonberry or cranberry, mountain cranberry. I never thought I'd be sentimental and miss cormorants, but when they come back, I'm glad to see them. And even horseshoe crabs. Some people think they look like insects or bugs or something, but anything that's 450 million years old and basically unchanged, you gotta have respect for it. And if you hold it up and turn it over, it's a boat. It's a perfect shape for a boat, and it can propel itself by flapping its gills like this, upside down. I mean, it's got tricks that you wouldn't suspect. And this is typical mating performance. Female in front, male behind who's ready to fertilize it. They come in, she laid a nest of eggs there, then another nest there, and she's doing the same there. In the same economical fashion, there's enough gravel here that it's something she can dig in. And you see this pattern even in Delaware. When they went down to Delaware, they were doing the same thing, making this U-turn. Look at that rock. I mean, they're undauntable, lifting a rock up with your head. And you can tell males from females, one by the size of the leading legs inside, but this arch of the male is built to go over this curvature, whereas the female doesn't have this marked curvature. So this male looks like he's smiling, whereas the female is more chin-slip like this. Okay, now we finally get to summer. When the drops look like drops, as they should. And I never appreciated the design of ferns until I realized the water that falls here runs down here, and then it runs down here and ends up down there. For this whole surface, the water ends up in the same place. You see, there is a drop coming in from the side, and then it goes boom, boom, boom. How did they design that? Who thought of that? I was sitting in my uncle's stone study that he made on Berrien Island. Now it's defunct and the windows are out of it. But a heron landed 10 feet away, and it was a blind, and so I took pictures. This is as close as I could get to a heron. And it was great. It hopped from there up to the top there, and it was facing this way, so I was all set with my camera to get it. As it flew off, I wanted its wing spread, and it did a rotation and went that way, leaving me stranded. So I have a picture of half a heron. And this is a nest. They typically lay 5 eggs, and the only way to get exercise is to go out, grab a branch, and flap like this to build up muscle tone in the wings, which they have to do because at some point they're going to take one flight and leave the nest. So they have to be able to do that. And you can see how close, there's a nest right below that one. And these guys have nothing to do with these guys. And they're tuned to the pitch of the voice of their parents. So the parents go off all day fishing, come back with frogs or fish or whatever in their gullet, and they make a as they come in, one pitch, and their young know the sound of their parents, and they get all excited and say, "Oh, goody, we're going to eat," and everybody else just ignored it. They can tell the voice, which all sound exactly the same way. And then on August 15th, they leave the nest about the same day, fly to the shore, and then fly back to the nest to get fed. And you can see they're kind of slender and young and adolescent looking. That's the majestic older heron. And your basic kingfisher. And an osprey. This is the female who's got the young in the nest. Here comes the male, and he's got a little bowl or something in his talon. So she's watching as all he does is he drops it into the nest, then he flies off, and then she comes back and makes sure that Junior gets to eat it. And there's no more beautiful bird than the osprey. It's just so graceful. Young eagles don't have that grace. They're kind of clumsy, blocky, and they're not pretty colored. They're the color of dry twig. But while Junior is in the nest, somebody is watching close, protecting it within 300 feet or so. And this picture took me 9 hours to take. I knew the eagle liked to hunt on this particular tree. I watched it countless times at low tide. And they take off into the wind. And the wind in the summer is southwest wind. So I figured I know which way they're going to leave. So I wanted to take this spread eagle taking off. So I went over before the eagle was there, got under the nest, made a hole through a dead spruce, pointed my camera up. For 4 hours I held this pose, and the eagle never came. So I left, and I came back the next day, and at the end of 5 hours the next day of doing the same thing, finally I got this picture. Flickers, hairy woodpeckers. Even the robin looks wild. When it's sitting on your lawn and it's listening for a worm, It looks kind of domestic, but sitting in the sumac branches, it looks native. And we got all kinds of sparrows. I love song sparrows. They're all around Bering Island, and they're very cheery. And this is a little magnolia warbler, just hatched, and I crawled into the tree with it because it was in there, and I was standing on the ground, and I just got my way in there, and it didn't pay any attention to me at all. It was looking for its mom and for food. This is a ring-billed gull, which is a little version of the herring gull. It has a black ring around its bill, and it's smaller. And they only feed at low tide, and then they kind of sit around the rest of the day. But when they hunt, they fly over the water fairly low, and then they stall. They see something down below. They see something down below. These are three different gulls. What do they see? Something in the water, something on the bottom. These are two different gulls. What they see is a worm. So they can only fish when the water is about a foot deep or less at low tide, which is probably 2 hours on a typical day during the daytime when they can see them, and use this technique. And then they just take off and do it again and again. You know, they'll do it for 2 hours, fly around in circles, doing this and slowly filling up with worms. Shorebirds, sandpipers come down. These are semi-palmated plovers. The flock turns from light to brown as they veer one way and then the other, as they expose their white belly like that, or their brown back. So as they veer, they go from black to brown. This is my favorite bird. I'm going to come back. It's a least sandpiper. It's perfectly camouflaged with seaweed at the tide line. It eats things in the seaweed, which is full of protein. They can fly, they can wade in the water, they can walk on land. I mean, what more do you want? This is a spotted sandpiper. And the irony is that it has no spots, but it's a spotted sandpiper without spots because it's a juvenile. It's got the beautiful yellow feet. Your basic garter snake. This is a very special snake. I gave it an IQ test and it registers at least 75 because I saw it first on the ground underneath a spruce tree, and there were wasps up at the ends of places like that getting moisture off the branches of the spruce tree. And it wanted those, and I've seen it in raspberry bushes, climbing raspberry bushes and doing the same for wasps that were getting the raspberries. But it figured out it didn't go towards the wasp, it went to the tree trunk on the ground, climbed the tree, picked the right branch to come out of, and then wrapped its tail around the branch and hung there as if it were a spruce branch. Now how's that for smart? I give that 75. The fact that it didn't go straight towards the wasp because it couldn't, they were up in the air above the tent. It went into the trunk, up the trunk, and out the right branch. I mean, it knows way more than you would think a snake would know. It was the loudest lobster boat. There was no muffler on it at all. Everybody knew when it was around. The clammers show up in the summer. I don't know how you smoke a cigarette and dig clams and have wet fingers at the same time. I mean, even humans amaze me. How do they do that? periwinkles, kelp. I didn't put that blade of kelp there. The tide did. It draped it over that branch and the tide went out. And I came along and simply took its picture. Indian pipes. Any idea what fertilizes Indian pipes? Have you ever seen anybody attracted to them? Any insect? Well, I have one picture. I don't have it in this collection, but a wasp that lives in the moss in the ground, the kind that you step on and then it stings you, the yellow jacket. When these turn up and expose their flower workings to the heavens, the yellow jackets come and fertilize it. Cloud lichen. You get into the study of lichen, I can't identify them by name. I take pictures of them. Those are called elephant's ears, I believe. You know, they're great big things. And here's a world unto itself. There's this little mound, I don't know, it's probably a stick. It's got fungi growing on it and berry goblets and all kinds of life. So I love getting down on my knees and seeing things like that. It's a universe at my feet. Haircat mouse. I could take pictures of fungi. I don't know the names of them, except that's edible, you know. But the colors and the shapes and the intricacy underneath is so beautiful. There are aphids on beach peas, mountain cranberry. Finally the berries come out on the bunchberry. Those are the berries before they get colored. Black and yellow field spider, an Argiope spider, and it builds this warning signal to birds so it won't crash its nest trying to get the spider. It knows there's something there. But, you know, that's a big spider, it's about that big. And it's got this beautiful yellow, black, and white coloration. Bowl and doily, there's a spider in between, protected from the rear, in the tree, and from above, and it hunts. And again, who's the architect who designed this? Somebody pretty smart. You love them or hate them. You hate them if they're in your attic. Or they eat your couch. This one, I was down on the shore photographing the full moon, and I was totally engrossed in watching the moon rise over Sullivan. And then I looked over, and here was this guy looking at the moon along next to me. But he didn't have a camera, and I had a camera. But I never thought of a squirrel observing the moon. Right? A squirrel with a sense of aesthetics. You'll see this again when I show my seal PowerPoint. There are 3 seals in this picture. The guy you can see, that's a seal. There's a seal there. They are hunting a school of fish, and they're leaping out of the water and going down and coming up and leaping down and having great fun. And there they come splashing, and it looks like I'd like to be a seal able to do that. And that's the guardian, that's the alpha male. You see the funny little snout he's got? The only seal in the bay that has that profile, so I can spot it. So that's my offering of this evening. I just you were waiting for all this time and you didn't know it.
It was well worth it.
It was
Very beautiful.
I condensed the whole year into one little show. And it's great to look at in the middle of the winter when you forget all this stuff. You know, it kind of is a reminder. Now, normally I was going to show you the seal one, but since I wasted an hour and a half of your time, I'm not going to do that. I just make you a solid promise. I'm going to be here on time next week.